All right, happy Friday, everybody, and thanks for joining me for this illustration masterclass. Today's episode is near and dear to me because this is something that I talk about a lot with students when I go and visit universities and things like that, as well as I've written a little bit about this online and shared some thoughts about this and its style, and whether or not you should choose to work in one particular style with your illustrations, whether you should mix it up. And there is no right or wrong answer to this question because there are pluses and minuses to both choices that you make. If you choose to work in one style, one of the benefits of that is that you basically create sort of a brand around your way of drawing, about your way of expressing yourself through illustration. And over time, as you continue to work in that style, well, that brand, of course, becomes more powerful and more recognizable. And you really settle into it and people know what to expect when they call you for a job. Now, the downside of this, of course, is that if that style that you have suits really only one kind of storytelling, one sort of genre of storytelling, or maybe it's kind of an aggressive kind of punk rock style that you have for your illustrations, well, that might not play so well for a really soft-hearted story about a family buying a puppy. Okay, so maybe those jobs are closed off to you. On the other hand, maybe you don't want to do those jobs, right? So there's a lot to think about when you talk about style and illustration. And so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to talk about some of these pluses and minuses, talk about a few illustrators who have figured out a way to work in multiple styles and how they've sort of gotten clever about that. Talk about my own work and the illustration work I've done over the years in many, many styles. The choice I made was to not have really one singular style with my work. And then at the end, just do a little drawing for you and show you how I think about playing around with style and how that can be possible and how maybe you could experiment with your own work and play and see what comes out of it. The main thing I want you to take away from today's class is that it's okay to allow yourself the freedom to explore different ways of working, and it's also okay to share that work with the public without a fear of people suddenly deciding that you don't know how to do what you already were known for. You've suddenly changed everything and that's all you are. Nobody, of course, is that simple. Nobody is that single-minded or focused on one thing, because that's just not who we are as humans, okay? All right, so I'm going to jump over here to Photoshop, and we're going to get this started. And before I dive right in, I just want to say hi to some folks in the chat who are joining us. So hi, Stephen and Umacorn and Lisa and Cody, and I see Hasi Newell is here, nice to see you, and Lisa and Megan, and Moat of Void is here, and Anika, Be Creative, Afroha. How's it going, everybody? Christelle, thanks for watching. Okay, so let's dive in here and let's talk about this. Now, what I'm going to do to start off with is just walk through a few illustration examples of my own where really what I'm going to show you is just my own explorations into playing with style. And most of these illustrations I'm going to show you, not all, but most of them have come out of me simply sitting down with no real idea in mind and then starting to draw and then allowing myself to just go with whatever the art kind of felt like. In this little demonstration, in this little illustration here, you're seeing just a face, obviously, but the style in which I drew it came out of my using actually a certain kind of a tool, and that was a vector brush. And I want to start right off the bat by saying that one of the great things about working in a digital environment with lots of brushes is that the brush you use can basically guide the style that you wind up settling on for an illustration, because the marks that you make are distinct and different from other kinds of marks you would make with a different tool. I know that in this case, working digitally, you're always working with a stylus, but the way that stylus makes marks on the canvas is different enough from other brushes that it can really force you into making choices and feeling limited with your choices. And I mean this kind of in a very positive way, okay? Limitations are a good thing in this case. If I were to work with a big fat brush which had a lot of texture, probably my inclination would not be to start doing really fine line work, because I just wouldn't be able to easily achieve that with the brush. It just wouldn't be possible. So therefore, I would try and create a picture using a different approach, okay? Maybe more shape-based, maybe more loosey-goosey, you know? Maybe more painterly, whatever it happens to be. And from this experimentation with the tools that you're using or with the brushes that you're using, you can sometimes hit upon something you really enjoy as a method of working, a style of working, and that can kind of grow on its own off to the side while you're still working in some other more familiar way. So vector lines being as clean and clear as they are forced me to really focus on this really clean, solid silhouette for this character and keep everything as simple as possible and as direct as possible in describing the features. And I decided to just add a little vector halftone pattern in the background. And I did that with Adobe Capture by simply using a regular halftone brush in Fresco and saving that image to my camera roll. I opened it in Capture and turned it into a vector shape, which you can do in a matter of seconds. And then I finished that off. So it's certainly nothing impressive or special, this drawing, but I wanted to just kick it off by saying that by picking up that vector brush and starting to doodle, it forced me into a way of thinking visually and working. All right, so I want to then move to this idea that sometimes the idea that I'm presented with is what dictates the style. And this was an editorial illustration for XD Ideas, which is a website talking about Adobe XD. And it was just talking about the importance of using design, what's it called when you go through and do inventory, checking to make sure that your designs have consistency, and making sure that you don't have little bits and pieces that don't fall into the style guide. They step out of that style guide and may cause a problem. And I thought, to really keep this simple and make it work, I don't want to draw this scene where we have a bunch of repetitive shapes or objects and a person signaling to someone else that one needs to be replaced with the right object to make things consistent. I didn't want to draw that with a complex approach with a lot of rendering and so on, because that would take away from the simplicity of the statement I wanted to make about this story idea, about this concept for the story. And so a shape-based approach worked for me here. We're able to see what's happening, but we're not distracted by the drawing, by the art itself. The art is not taking center stage so much in a way where I would be focusing on the person's face over here and things like that. And so by being able to be flexible with the way I work with style, it allows me to solve different problems for different kinds of stories and not be locked into just one way of working and maybe spinning my wheels and not being able to solve a problem with the one particular style without it being distracting or not appropriate for that kind of work, okay? And then here is a completely different kind of work, which is just trying to create a pretty picture, drawing a face and trying to do it in such a way that the lines are carefully chosen and they have some rhythm to them and some nice qualities to them. The line weight is varied ever so slightly, but all of it's meant to feel descriptive, but not overly so. Something like this could be appropriate for a portrait assignment for a editorial job or for an advertising job, and could work as a series, And so being able to draw quote unquote realistically, right, can also open doors to different kinds of assignments and different kinds of work. And I should stop here for a moment and say it's really important that if you don't enjoy working in a certain way, okay, even if you think that working in that way might bring in more assignments and more client work, I would say it's not probably worth it to go down that road, because at the end of the day, the enjoyment of creating the work should really be there most of the time when you're doing this kind of a job. When you're an artist, you want to be enjoying what you're doing, and it will show in the work that you do. So if I knew, for example, that I could make a lot of money doing really detailed renderings of NASCAR vehicles, okay? I just wouldn't do it because, first of all, I hate drawing cars. Second of all, I have no interest in NASCAR. And third, I just don't really have an interest in doing really heavy rendered stuff, especially of mechanical nature. That to me would be very boring, very unfulfilling kind of work. And so I would stay away from it. But since I do enjoy drawing heads and I do enjoy drawing portraits, something like this, even though it's very different from something like this, which I also enjoy, I'm happy to work it in there. So if you do enjoy more than one thing and you want to work it in, great. But if you want to just add something to your portfolio to bulk it up and you don't enjoy doing that kind of work, I would say steer clear of it, okay? There's a completely different kind of drawing altogether that, you know, for me, it was just, I had in my hand a brush that was really fine, made a fine line, a clean, fine line. And it was different from the vector brush because there's a tiny bit of texture there, but you can't tell it, but to draw with it feels different. And once I started drawing, it just felt like the kind of work, the kind of style that I wanted to immediately use when I picked up this quote unquote pen. Of course, this is all just digital. Made me want to draw this way. Sometimes you pick up a tool and it just makes you want to draw a certain way. And so I just go with that. I try not to fight the medium. And I think this goes for traditional media as well. You know, you don't really want to try and work with watercolors in the same way that you work with oils. That doesn't make sense, you know? So that's what came out of me picking up this tool, and this silly little character came out of that. All right, so, and then here again is another example of me just playing with shapes and textures. And I like to bounce around and try these different things, but I wanted to show this because stylistically, this kind of thing could apply really well to maybe advertising jobs for packaging, you know, maybe like soaps or some other kind of product like that. Maybe changing it up for like a bottled water company or things like that, you know. And this brings up a good point, which is that certain kinds of illustration just don't lend themselves well to certain kinds of products. Now, sometimes if you're trying to just shake things up, you know, like a wine label is a great place to really try lots of different things. If you go down to the store and look at a bunch of wine labels, you're going to notice all kinds of different art styles, and people will try and make the product jump off the shelf at you, either with its sophistication or with its really irreverent kind of loud style. Depends. But there are a lot of cases where really only one kind of feeling is going to be suited for the job. And again, if you work in just one style, you might be closed off from that. But you might also work in a style where there's just a whole bunch of work for you, and you don't need those other jobs, and that's fine. And then here's something that's all about making marks with different tools and seeing where it leads, and then trying to make some sense of it by, of course, you know, adding a little face, which is always an easy thing to do. You can make a whole bunch of a big mess on the canvas, and as long as you stick an eye in there or a nose or mouth, whatever, you can kind of make it work. But I think this is something people should try more often, which is to just throw stuff down and then try and pull a picture out of it. And that as a method in and of itself might become a style for you. Yes, it might be a little more difficult to apply this to client work if they don't really know what to expect because your process is so organic. But then you could take this process and you could do it for self-generated work that could bring in income through prints for sale or products or things like that. You just don't know. So that's another thing to consider as well. And here we see a combination of like the shape-based work, the textural work, a bit of line, really kind of all of that stuff just thrown together for a different kind of a scene. And this illustration I actually did on my own for fun because I wanted to play with some new brushes for the winter 2020 brush set that just came out a few months ago. And somebody saw it online and it was actually a winery. And they sent me a note and asked if they could buy it for a wine label. And so I got this on a wine label and got a commission for a personal piece that came purely out of experimentation. And this is another thing I want to talk about, which is the sharing of the work, which I think people are hesitant or scared sometimes to share work that doesn't look like the work they're known for. And I would say not to worry so much about that. I know this goes against conventional wisdom, and maybe this goes against what a lot of art students are told when they're going to art school. You got to make sure your book looks like one thing. And I do understand where that advice comes from, and I do think that when you're starting out, probably having at least most of your work look consistent is a good thing. But after you've been out there for a little while, you want to throw some other stuff out there, or even right out of the gate, if you want to just put it in a separate category on your webpage and say personal work or experiments or something like that, it's totally fine. If you don't put it out there, you don't know what could come of it. If you just keep it all to yourself, well, what good is that going to do? So me sharing this on Instagram and Twitter is how it got seen, and then how it eventually translated into a commission. I didn't have to do anything except send them the art file. I didn't even have to change anything. They liked it as is. So hey, lucky break, right? But that has happened to me numerous times over the past 15 years or so. And so share your experiments if you think they look good. If you think, hey, that turned out okay. No good just keeping it to yourself. Okay. Let me pause for some questions here for a moment, see if anybody has anything to say. The more you focus on overall shapes, the more focus you put on the illustration or product, whereas if you put a lot of complex detailing, you want to focus on that. Well, Farah, that's an interesting way of putting it, and I'd say yes and no. I think if there's a message that you're trying to get across, in commercial art, it's oftentimes you're trying to sell something or communicate something. If it's editorial art, sometimes that message needs to be communicated in an efficient way, right? Or in a way that it jumps out at the reader as being about something very specific, and we get it right away. Other times it has to be more subtle. It depends on the attention span of the people. Like, where is this being seen? Is it being seen on a billboard as people are driving by, or they're running through an airport and it's just up on the wall? Or is there something where they can rest for a moment with it and they can really take it in and digest it? So there are different things to think about there. And I'm going to show you in a moment some illustration samples from artists who work consistently. And one of them is a man named Tim O-Brien, who, his work is certainly not lacking in detail and in rendering. And he does book cover work, advertising work, he does editorial work. So he's able to work in these different categories, but maybe not for all stories. Maybe for a spot illustration, for example, that's going to run at 2 inches square in the New Yorker. You're not going to call Tim O-Brien for that. You call him for a cover, for a full page. It makes more sense. So I'm not sure if that really helps or answers your question, but I think, as with many things, the answer is it depends. What else do we have here? I guess one could have more than one good book. I assume you mean more than one good portfolio, right? The answer is yes. So here, this is just a demo I did for another masterclass. Or no, actually I did this for my students here at the University of North Carolina School of the Arts, and as a demo for them about what you can do with just the lasso tool. And we did a masterclass about that a few weeks ago. And this is an example of, you don't need much, and I want you to sometimes think about, if you've ever thought about working in a different way, maybe to start simple. Start with something where you can kind of understand how to do it without a lot of busy work, without a lot of research and stuff. If you just want to jump into something, start with something simple. If it's printmaking, for example, don't start with doing an etching that takes you 2 weeks to draw and print and so on. Maybe just do a tiny little 3-inch etching where you just kind of get the hang of it and see if you like working that way. Give yourself a bite-sized project to work on. And this is an example of a bite-sized project in my view, which is, lasso tool, color fill, think of something that I can build up with foreground, middle ground, and background that's not too complex, and then just go for it and see how it works out. Okay. And then take that same way of working, as you see here, take that same approach. And this came, I believe, out of this drawing. I believe I did this, and then right after it, I did this one, because I was thinking in that same way about taking the lasso tool, making some shapes, filling it with color. But then I was also thinking about using brushes on top of that to add texture to the illustration, as well as I use this brush right here at the bottom to add the grass and the spatter. And trying to then combine different ways of working and see if they gel and see if something new comes out of that. And I really enjoyed this, and I'll probably wind up doing it in the future a little bit more, because I think the result was pleasing. This was a pretty fast way of working as well, so I liked that. And then just turning it around completely and trying a different kind of illustration work than what you normally do. Now, I'm not a character designer. I don't do character design work. I have done a few jobs for clients where I've designed an original character for a brand, or for a logo or something like that, but not a whole bunch. And so what I think is also helpful is for you to sometimes try and flex a different muscle and try and sort of understand what goes into making that work. So, if you've been doing a certain kind of maybe product illustration, or you've been doing character design for 5 years straight, maybe stop for a moment and then see if you can do a simple landscape, and see how would you approach that? What feels like the natural way for you to do it? And whatever doesn't feel natural, try that too, and see what comes out of that experimentation. This is how you can grow and find new ways of working. And when I talk about growth too, with people who work in one particular style, it's not that they're not growing over time. I think about artists all the time, like John Hendricks or others, who you can still see in the work he does today, his hand, his eye, his approach, that I saw the very first illustration I ever saw him do 15 years ago. But there's still growth in his style. If you look at it over the years, it's consistent, but it just keeps getting more and more, becomes more of the thing that it is. I'm not sure exactly how to explain that, but it's more and more him, and more of a pure sort of John Hendricksian work of art as he continues to draw this way. So the growth happens with one single style as well, and you can see this looking at anybody's work over a period of 15 or 20 years, okay? You don't want to be stagnant, Sometimes I like to just try and draw with ink and see what I can do with line, and see if I'm understanding correctly how to use spot blacks and things like that. And, this is mostly successful, I think, but there are other problems with it. And when I do a drawing like this, even if here's another thing I want to mention, is even if I know there are problems, it's not perfect, it's not exactly where I wanted it to be. I definitely have some issues with how I did the shadows on the face here. Some things don't make sense, with lighting and all that. There are some problems, but generally I was okay with it. This is the kind of thing I feel like you can share this on social. You don't have to put it on your website. Or, if there's a particular social channel that you're really grooming all the time and trying to make perfect, and you're always curating, well, then maybe don't put it there. But if you just want to share it, on Twitter or something, you just go for it, and see what kind of feedback you get, and that can inform how you move forward. And it's like with something like this, which was very intimidating for me to draw. This is really not normally what I would do, this kind of thing. But I was asked to do a page for a tribute for Mike Waringo, and I was so excited to do it that I thought, okay, I'm just going to really buckle down and study how to work with ink and just not use any color. And, it was a great time for me to just try and learn. And this is, growth comes from that too. And I was trying to think how best to show this jar, and deal with these little areas that kind of suggest that it's transparent and whatnot. All that kind of stuff. It was a great experiment for me to work on this glove and try and figure out how to draw that. And I looked at, lots of artists from Mad Magazine, and where there was a lot of heavy inking work, and comics, of course, and artists like Bernie Wrightson and people like that, and just tried to sort of figure out how I could make this work. And I think overall it was okay. There are some problems with it as well. I got some perspective issues here, big time, that really need to be addressed. But getting the drawing done, I can then look at it later and say, okay, well, I know what I need to work on for next time. You know what I mean? And then, trying again to just completely take something familiar and then try it in a different style. And I really think this is a fun way for you to do fan art, because everyone likes fan art, right? If you like a certain property, a certain character, whatever, see if you can draw it in a way that it has not been drawn before or is not usually represented in its original form. That's a great way to push yourself and play with style. And so this is my take on Leonardo there, okay? And then here, like trying something more painterly, because in a digital environment, there's no harm done. You can just pick colors and paint. You're not paying for oils, and you're not going to waste a bunch of money on that and on medium and waiting for it to dry. So, try something painterly and see, if you've never tried that before, what that does to how you work when you're not thinking about lines so much anymore, but you're thinking about edges and all that. And then more of the same here, me just kind of painting around. And then traditional media. If you've only done digital your whole life, boy, you're missing out. Go out there and grab some watercolors and colored pencil and try something like this. Do a little line drawing and then throw some watercolor washes in there and scratch into it with the handle of the brush, and do some washes and just see what that does. And I think it's going to help you work in a digital way as well. Go back and forth. The last one I wanted to show is just this, because earlier I was talking about not wanting to do certain kinds of drawings. I never would want to draw a map like this, but I did. And this is where I want to talk about the exception to the rule, which is I'm not going to fill my portfolio with this. In fact, this isn't even on my website. I don't think. Maybe it is. But I certainly wouldn't be going around telling everybody, hey, hire me for maps like this, because boy, is that fun. No, I certainly didn't enjoy this job one bit. But I'll tell you that this job paid more than about 15 of my normal jobs combined. And so there are times where, if you are a commercial artist and you do need to make money, if someone comes along with the right price and you know that you're capable of doing the work, you give yourself a break and do the work, and then spend a month working on that personal project, like a picture book that you need to get published that you've always wanted to try and sell, but you felt guilty because you wanted to get the work done for your other client assignments. If you want to make this kind of money on one job and it frees you up to work on something personal for a couple of weeks, hey, do it, okay? All right, so let's talk about working in multiple styles. This is Elvis Swift, okay? This is one of his really nice line drawings. Isn't that beautiful? He's got this really fluid, linear style. It's wonderful. And Elvis got known for this kind of work, right? And guess what he did? If sometimes, you really lock in on a style and you feel like this is who you are and you want the clients to know this is who you are. Well, what you do is you create an alter ego. And so this is also Elvis Swift, except he goes by Jack Malloy. So illustrators have done this for years. They come up with an alter ego. They create a whole book of work, create a whole separate website. And this is a really great way to work around this issue of having multiple styles, where if you don't feel comfortable kind of throwing it all out there, if you have two kind of ways you really enjoy working with, and they're both marketable, you can do this. You can become two different people, because with the internet, nobody knows the difference. Nobody knows. It's totally fine. And so I think that's really cool. So we got this, and we got this, and that's Elvis and Jack right there. Plenty of work coming in for both. Another great example right here. This is the work of an illustrator who's not his real name, but his alter ego name is Sam Island. And really great cartoony, single weight line style, flat color, very charming. These are just fun illustrations. Everything he does is fun. And his other style, which is his original style as Ryan Snook, that's his real name, is also really, really fun, but it's different. This was kind of a different way for him to work. And it started with really simple spot illustrations. So like this right here, just this woman with her head in the sand, or this book by itself, or this bird. Those would be kind of the illustrations normally Sam Island would have done at the beginning of Sam Island's career, right? When things kind of ballooned and he's really got a lot of work now working as Sam Island, but he also gets a lot of work as himself right here, Ryan Snook. And you can see there's definitely something similar about, of course, the color palettes, right? But this is a very different way of drawing, right? Thick to thin, lots of line weight differences. We got some halftone patterns in there. These compositions are more complex. You've got shadows to deal with and things like that. More fine lines and details everywhere. So same guy, okay, found that he enjoyed working in this other way. And so he just went ahead and created a person, Sam Island, great name too, by the way, and started making work as Sam Island. So this is a great, great, great way to work around that. If you don't want to have multiple kinds of images in your portfolio, you can create an alter ego and you can work that way. And I think that's pretty amazing. Let me just jump out here for a moment to this is what I want to show you here. I did a series of black and white line drawings for portraits of celebrities for a teeny tiny publication years and years and years ago. But they got passed around on the internet. And then I got a call to do a major emergency campaign. Emergen-C is this stuff you can buy at the drugstore and like boost your immune system, or if you have a cold, you take it. And it was great because this style that I had been using for those magazines, I didn't use it anywhere else. It was just this one little thing I used to do, and there was these little head portraits, simple little line drawings. But it led to this really big campaign. Let's see if you can see this. And they went ahead and animated these drawings that I did, and it was really, really fun. Got to draw these cats or whatever. And there were several of these campaign ads, and I got to, over the course of a year, continually create these different illustrations with this advertising agency. And this is one of the best jobs I ever had when I was a freelancer, but it came out of one little set of drawings I was doing every couple of weeks for this other group of folks. And it's amazing what can come out of putting it out there. I didn't really have to share that work, and it was peanuts in terms of pay and all that, but I just thought maybe something will come out of this. And that's what I want to, again, say. If you do an experiment, you like it, throw it out there. Here's Tim O'Brien, who I was talking about a little while ago. Now look, if you just glance at his portfolio, it's immediately apparent that one person is doing this work, right? Beautiful realism, really strong stuff. Look at this. And he does have sort of a palette that he'll go to pretty frequently. It's sort of, I don't know how to explain it, but it's a warm palette, right? This kind of golden light. And I think that's one of the signature styles that he has, or one of the signatures of his style, I should say. And this is the thing, if you're working in realism, sometimes it's hard to kind of stand out from other realists. So what happens is it can come through in the colors that you can use. It can come through in your rendering style. And Tim has figured all that out. And he gets a lot of work, and it's a lot of good paying work, because with this kind of a style that he has, it's going to be covers. It's going to be full page work, right? It's going to be big ad campaigns and whatnot. And he's also going to be given the luxury of time, for some of these assignments. Now, of course, I say time, and when you talk about these Time magazine covers, some of those really have to be turned around fast. But for book work and things like that, you might have a couple of weeks to work on a painting and really get it looking good. And that's a wonderful thing, and it suits his work, it suits his style. And you can just see, as you scroll, all very clearly the same person making these illustrations, right? We don't have any question about who's doing these. And so that's an example of someone who's built a long career working on this one style. This is one of my favorites he ever did. I love this Beck portrait. I love those colors, blue and purple. Doesn't look like a lot of his other stuff, I wish this image were bigger. You would see his rendering style. A lot of times he has this very small brushstroke work he does all the way throughout the painting. It's really nice. And then you have something completely different, someone like Yuko Shimizu. And again, just looking at these thumbnails, you say, oh, that is clearly the same human drawing these pictures. There's no doubt about it. Her line work has a very distinct look to it, right? Always the black line work for the main characters and subjects, and then you have colored line work for other elements as well. Sometimes changing it up with the color of the line work, but mostly it's this kind of really strong, heavy line, and always with the brush work. See that? Really distinct brush illustration for the line work. Okay, you can see that's probably either a Pentel pocket brush or or maybe an actual brush like a Winsor Newton. But and probably digital color. I'm guessing, yeah, this looks like digital color. But I think the colors are always really secondary to the careful drawing style. And a lot of the drawing style you can see it's not done from reference exactly, like a pose like this and a pose like this. There's a distortion to the figures where probably a lot of what she's drawing is coming from her imagination, and that's what's also recognizable in her style and appealing in her style, right? But tons of work, and this is an example of choosing a style in which to work, which obviously she's comfortable with and really is her own, right? But it can be applied in a lot of different ways. Advertising, comics, editorial, perhaps even some kinds of animation, a range of different subjects. You could do a lot of different stuff with this. Certainly book cover work. So a person like Yuko, even though she might try some other things here and there, for her commercial art, there's not really any reason for her to mix it up because she's going to continually get calls for the way that she works, for her brand, so to speak. And so that really works. But then you have a guy like Chris Gash, this completely different kind of work. Look at this. Very flat graphic work. And so what is it about Chris's work that stands out? Well, it might not necessarily be the style as much as it is the ideas, because Chris is an incredible conceptual illustrator. The way he thinks through an illustration problem and then solves it with a unique visual. This goes back to what I was saying earlier about you don't want the illustration style to be so busy and so detailed and so heavily rendered that it takes away from the clarity of the idea. You know what I mean? And so here, let's look at this one, for example. So this idea of this long book being carried by these two folks and then the kid. So the subject here, it says, supporting equity in education, right? Really, really wonderful the way they're doing this support idea, okay? Or rather, he's doing that support idea. Let's look at this one. The motherhood penalty. So look what they're showing here. This elevator goes up to a higher floor than this elevator, okay? And so right away we're getting this idea that career-wise she's being punished for taking the time off to have a baby and for being a mom. And if you had gone to the trouble of really rendering out the suit and this and that and getting this lighting all amazing and the texture on the floor and on the elevator and blah, 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 it might take you a minute to actually see these two details, okay? But the simple color palette, the simple shape-based illustration, this just nails it and it makes sense right away. And so he's just a master of distilling it down to what's essential to tell the story, and then of course still great illustrations because the shapes are really nice, the compositions are really nice, everything really works in a lovely way. This is one of my favorites here. This is the cyber threats, digital weaknesses and cyber threats. That is so smart. Okay, so we have this ancient Roman or Greek vase, and I just love the Achilles heel idea with the one arrow that we all recognize as the cursor on your computer. That's really clever. All right, so you get the idea, right? And so as I scroll down, of course, again, very consistent. You call Chris, you know what you're going to get. And so that can be a real bonus there, right? That can be a bonus for having a consistent style, is people know what they're going to get. They're not going to do any guesswork. All right, but so, what if someone calls you and says, hey, we'd like to have a kid playing soccer, just a simple drawing of a kid playing soccer. Well, I did these 4 different sketches today for a kid playing soccer, and I wanted to show, even a simple topic like that, you could have this really graphic approach that's shape-based, and I could finish this out really quickly with some texture and some lasso tool action. You could have this cartoony style here, right? Maybe a little bit more manga inspired, I guess. Then you could have a more realistic one, and I could probably paint that, or maybe even do line art with like a watercolor wash and make it a little more realistic, right? So you've got more realism in the proportions of the figure and everything else. And then you could have this kind of Franco-Belgian kind of a comic approach as well as a style. And all 4 of them could work. And it just depends on what you want to do and what you think suits the assignment. So maybe, like, it depends on who's calling you. Maybe it's an agency and they're going to do a series of icons for different activities kids can do. And so you want to have something like this. It would just be shape-based, really simple, kind of iconic little logo almost, right? And maybe it's like a kids magazine and it's more modern and they like this sort of a style. Maybe it's a magazine like Scholastic magazine and they have a story in there for 3rd, 4th grade reading level, talking about kids playing soccer, and they want a more realistic depiction of a hero character maybe who's playing the soccer. And then maybe it's actually a comic that you're working on, a graphic novel, and this is kind of the style in which you're working. And so that makes sense. I don't know. But to try these different things as an experiment, pick something simple for yourself and see how many ways you can draw that one simple thing and see what comes out of it. So let me just knock this back a little bit here. And so for this, I might just get my shapes in here. And I know that we're short on time, so I'm not going to make this perfect or anything, but just to show you how fun it is to play with style, I'll do a couple of these, okay? Okay, and you could lock the layer transparency here. And then just go ahead and grab something that's got some fun textural business in it, like here's a spatter brush. So maybe I try some neat stuff in there. And maybe I do a couple little call outs. Like that. Just say, all right, we'll throw a couple little details in there. Right? Color-wise. And maybe that's kind of it. I don't know. So that could be like one way of doing. Someone says, okay, draw a kid playing soccer. You go, all right, gotcha. And this is one of your solutions, Okay, let's go back to our sketches here. And then for this one, we say, all right, we want kind of like a more of a line art with flat color, cartoony kind of approach. So you say, okay, I gotcha. Maybe, or like maybe use that Belgian comics, but this will be fine. Yeah, this will be fine. So here I'm just thinking like make the line art lively, simple, straightforward, really like clear line of action all the way across. Oops. And that's what this style is. This is something else that, you know, maybe at the end of the day I look at it and say, okay, that's probably not the way I want to go. But another thing is you can show clients options. And a lot of clients like options, you know, not all the time, but most of the time that's kind of an exciting thing for them. You know, so there's another benefit of being able to change it up, you know? And other times you think, well, they're calling me because they like what I do, so you know, I don't have to change it up. I know why they called me. They called me because they want me to do my thing. And that's one of the nice things about having your own style too, is there's kind of no question about what's going to happen. But I have to tell you, you know, all those illustrations I did in multiple styles over the years, it really wasn't a problem because I would just say to the client, yeah, what do you like in my book? Just tell me what style you think kind of works for this, and I'll do that. And then they're like, okay, and problem solved. So that was pretty nice, you know? Yeah, so then why don't we look here, let's say, oh yeah, we could do like a pencil and watercolor kind of wash thing, you know? So I would grab pencil, so we'll go to my Mega Pack, drawing box, we'll get the perfect pencil. Where are you? There you are. So of course here I'm going to do more line work than the previous example, right? Still not a ton. But with this drawing I could probably also do some add some values if I wanted to. Like I could do this kind of thing, like just sort of maybe there's some areas where I go a little darker with the pencil, rather than trying to achieve that with the watercolor. Maybe most of the heavy lifting is the pencil work, right? And this is a great example of the tool sort of guiding me towards making certain decisions. It's going to say, you know, this feels good to draw this way with this brush, so just do what feels natural for that tool, you know? And since that's what feels natural to me, because if I had pencil, I'd probably be doing that anyway. I'd be adjusting my line weight, and I'd be trying to do a little rendering here and there, right? That just feels right. So then that's what I do with the drawing, you know? All right, so you get the idea, right? So now I'm drawing this way, and I could then come in underneath it with a watercolor book, listen to me. So we go to, where did I put my watercolors? Are they in here? I think I have them loaded. Oof, I might not. But that's okay, because I can do I got a few watercolors here in the paint box. So maybe something like this. Yeah, it's not the most watercolory, but my watercolor set would be a much better match for this, but you get the idea. Let's hide that sketch for a minute. You can see what that looks like. It's got a little paper texture and whatnot sort of built in there, right? Okay. Yeah, so there's another approach, you know? Watercolor and pencil, right? So we're doing these different things to just see what's possible. We want to see what's possible. You bring back that sketch, then we can look at this one. You know, this could be maybe Belgian comics action, right? Could also be just pure shape, you know. It could be that, or, you know, there's so many ways to go. In this case, I could use colored line, you know, so if I wanted to use something that was a little finer, like this is what I was originally thinking, was the Belgian comics brush. Something like that would be pretty good here. Just allows you to do these nice sharp lines. But another thing you could do is some colored lines. So you could do thinner line weight, like this. You could have some finer line work. And then you could lock transparency, and like if maybe his hair is like pink or something, you know, you could make those lines a darker pink or purple color. You know, like this. Works better with finer lines, though. You don't want to do this with like really extra thick lines. It doesn't make sense. Okay. And behind that, you have a lighter color. And so that's another nice kind of way to work as well. Completely different. Okay, so I hope you get the idea. See how fun it is to experiment. Here's some of the advantages and disadvantages of working one way or another. And I hope this is educational. I hope it maybe gave you food for thought. And maybe you're going to try some cool stuff with your drawings that's a little different and experiment a little bit. You might hit on something that really looks good and makes you say, hey, I want to kind of take that farther and see what happens. And maybe something will evolve out of it that can become a way that you work more regularly and something that can get you some assignment work, or something that you can use to create self-generated stuff, comics, prints, whatever it happens to be. There are pluses and minuses here to consider when choosing to work in one style or many. If you're interested in the article I wrote about it, it's called The Style Problem for Artists. Just look that up along with my name and you'll find that article, and I recommend you read it. I talk about the pluses for me and my career working this way. All right, everybody have a great weekend. Thanks for hanging out with me. I appreciate you watching me talk and draw. It's always nice to hang out with you guys. And everybody take care of yourselves, take care of each other. Remember to be kind, and I will see you next time. Ciao for now.